Paris is like love or art or faith. Can't be explained, only felt. As a kid, when I first heard those words in a movie, a great movie, Gene Kelly was my introduction to this magical city. Most people only know Paris through art or poetry. And this can create certain idealized expectations that become embedded in our neural networks. Of course, Paris isn't always what we see in the movies. Waiters don't just burst into song at the drop of a hat, no matter how much I tip them. And in extreme cases, some tourists suffer a bizarre pathological reaction when their idealized version of this city collides with the real thing. They feel disoriented, suffer feelings of delusion and paranoia. Some even experience hallucinations. This extreme form of culture shock is known appropriately as Paris syndrome. What does this sort of phenomenon teach us about the brain's ability or inability to adapt to the strange and the unfamiliar? You've gained weight. You look tired. What the hell is going on with your hair? It doesn't matter how well your day is going. All it takes is one little offhand comment to ruin it, right? That's because the brain is hardwired to remember the negative interactions better than the positive ones. But recent discoveries suggest that the higher regions of the brain can actually modify how the lower regions function. That we can use our intention and our attention in sustained, focused ways to overcome the brain's negative bias, so that it can be within our control to determine how bad experiences affect us. In other words, unless you're clinically depressed, being unhappy may in fact be a choice. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Or will they? The same areas of the brain get activated when we experience social rejection or the betrayal of a loved one as when we spill hot coffee on our arm. In other words, emotional pain hurts the same as physical pain. Science has developed drugs that can alleviate and, in some cases, eliminate our physical pain. And some of those same drugs are now proving helpful in eliminating our emotional pain. So the prescription for a broken heart might actually be take 2 Tylenol and call me in the morning. But is numbing our pain always a good thing? The more we know pain in all its varying flavors, the more we can appreciate the sensations and the feelings that we like. It's the nature of contrast. If we never felt bitterness or anger, then we wouldn't deeply appreciate our happiness. And if we never knew fear, then we couldn't admire courage. So maybe to more fully enjoy the beauty in our lives, we must first acknowledge and embrace our pain. The brain stores memories in different ways. Short-term memories, where you left the keys, the name of the girl you picked up at the bar last night, are managed by the hippocampus, but the hippocampus doesn't keep them for long. It kicks them out to the cortex, where they strengthen or weaken, depending on how often you visit them. Every time you access a memory, neurons are activated, and that memory grows stronger. But ignore a memory for too long, and you may lose it forever. The past can come back to haunt us. Sins of our youth, old illnesses and injuries, they can stick with us for a lifetime. Even for all its incredible power, that tangled mass of neurons that you call your brain is a remarkably fragile organ. Take it out of its bone helmet, and it's just jello, vulnerable to the slightest wound. A single concussion can have long-term effects that show up decades later as major diseases like Parkinson's. A few too many nights of binge drinking, and your brain might never be the same. But does that mean that we should live in protective cocoons? Never exposing ourselves to potential hurt, physical or emotional? Or is the real art of living to overcome our wounds? Make the best of our limitations. And embrace our gifts. Don't touch that dial. It's a pop quiz. I know. Okay, you ready? Turn it over and start now.
I think there might be a mistake. The answers are stapled to the test.
Correct. Before Miss Goody Two-Shoes here blew the whistle, the neurons in your ventromedial and dorsolateral prefrontal cortices were firing on all cylinders, creating a rush of adrenaline and dopamine, not unlike a boxer about to enter the ring. But the fight here was between impulse and self-control. It's called temptation. Now, her cognitive control mechanisms stopped her from cheating, but some of you were about to go through with it. I know you were. Yeah, right? Your self-control was hyped by the more emotional and impulsive limbic system, which wanted the easy A. That's bad. That's bad because when we exercise self-restraint, we have greater success at work, stronger relationships, and better mental health. So if it's better to resist temptation, why do we always find it so easy to give in? If you believe in the guy with the red cape and the pitchfork, then the world is divided up into good and evil. Of course, evolved thinkers like us know that life's not quite so absolute. Or is it? fMRI scans of psychopaths reveal that their brains have subtle differences. There's less activity in their prefrontal cortices and decreased regional gray matter in their paralimbic systems. In other words, they may be wired to do evil. It's a scary thought. But equally amazing is our capacity to do good. The brain's ability to create empathy, compassion, and connection. These things can give someone the drive to live a life of sacrifice, or to commit to someone they love. Or just to connect with a friend. I read your papers on peripheral neuropathy yesterday. 5 precious hours of my life that I'll never get back. Memorizing facts and then regurgitating them in 2,000 carefully crafted words is not science, people. It's intellectual bulimia. Real science happens when we explore what we don't know. Galileo, Curie, Einstein. They all had the imagination and the guts to look at a set of facts and say, okay, but what about this? And what if that? They asked questions. So instead of revisiting what we already know, let's spend this hour in pursuit of ignorance. Our own. And since Mr. Lewicki is an expert in the field of ignorance, he will lead the discussion. Think of your life as a story. Actually, you already do. fMRI studies show us that following a story, a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, causes our brains to release cortisol and oxytocin. These chemicals give us the uniquely human ability to connect with someone, even a total stranger, and empathize. In other words, stories are what we use to find meaning in our lives. Now imagine for a moment that we lived without the understanding that our story must eventually end. What if our lives were as infinite as the universe, if the ticking clock never stopped, what would our story be then? Would we still love or care? Would those tiny, fleeting moments that mean everything mean anything at all? A man loses both limbs and gets robotic ones that he can power with his mind. A gaggle of baby geese accepts a zoologist as their mother. And Lewicki, having a hard time finding romance, turns to a virtual sex simulator created by an adult toy company in Japan. Prosthetic limbs, filial imprinting, Japanese sex robots. What do they all have in common? They're all replacements. From limbs made of steel and wires, to mothers that aren't even of the same species, to highly evolved self-pleasure devices. As far as the brain is concerned, if it gets the job done, does it really matter if it ain't the real thing? How many of you have heard the term mommy brain? For generations, women have been told that having children will turn their brains to mush, that the demands of motherhood will cause them to spiral into mindless behavior like putting the keys in the refrigerator or the milk in the closet. But in fact, recent studies show that new mothers develop certain cognitive enhancements. The hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex actually grow postpartum. These areas motivate a mom to care for her infant, to enjoy the simple interactions, and to be more effective at skills like reasoning, planning, and judgment. Put another way, love grows a mother's brain. Literally. But what about dads? Men's testosterone levels drop by about a third in the weeks following their child's arrival, making them more nurturing, less aggressive. But before you guys start panicking about the other side effect of low T, just keep in mind that your wife will probably be more interested in the baby than in your baby maker. As amazing as these brain makeovers are, all the neurobiology in the world can't explain the joy that comes from holding a newborn. Or from witnessing the miracle of new life. Or so I'm told. How many of you are elitists? Ready? Nobody? Those designer jeans, they really worth $200? And you, Basketball Jones, those customized high tops make you dunk like LeBron? Clever marketing has conditioned us to believe that we get what we pay for. In fact, researchers at Stanford used an MRI to gauge brain activity while participants sipped samples of red wine. Guess what they found? When people thought that they were drinking $5 Merlot, the medial orbital frontal cortex, part of the brain involved with pleasure and reward, was minimally active. But when told that same wine was a $100 bottle of Chateau Neuf de Pape, the pleasure center lit up like the Las Vegas Strip. Which tells us, even though we may not be snobs, our medial orbitofrontal cortices are. Why are breakups so damn excruciating? Maybe because everything reminds you of your lover, and hence your loss. Hearing your favorite Smith song on the radio, eating hot dogs on the lopsided park bench where the first I love yous were spoken. It's no wonder you can't go 24 hours without bursting into tears. When people see images of their loved ones, the caudate nucleus of their basal ganglia floods with dopamine. Nicotine and other drugs also stimulate increases in dopamine, so that when you try to quit smoking or sugar, your brain craves that substance the same way it craves the person who broke your freaking heart. You'll do crazy, idiotic things to get your fix. That's because when you're in love, it's not as if you're an addict. You are an addict. Literally. 'Cause 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 '
they all know. Going cold turkey is a bitch.